All right, in lecture, we just finished talking about the different types of virulence factors, all the things that can increase the chance of some microorganism causing disease. We're then going to now look at what are the stages of infectious disease. So something has gotten in, it's found a home, it's multiplying, it is causing disease. But there are stages it goes through once it gets in there, takes hold, and causes disease. There are 5 stages. There's an incubation period, a prodromal, an illness or invasion period, a decline period, and a convalescence. So this is all based on a timeline. So for example, the person next to you that's looking a little sick sneezed on you. Right away, you may have just picked up a virus, but right away you're not feeling sick. Again, there's things that has to happen for that virus to get in, find a home, take hold, start to reproduce. So when you're not right away, someone sneezed on you, you're not showing any signs, you're not showing any symptoms, it's known as the incubation period. Again, that bacteria, that virus is just, getting itself set up. Maybe it's breaking down food sources, it's finding a home, it's getting prepared to multiply and cause some different diseases. But right away, you're feeling fine. The second stage it goes into is known as the prodromal. This, as we're looking at numbers of organisms, the organism is now just starting to divide. And this is when you wake up and you're like, I'm just feeling a little off. Maybe you're feeling a little tired. Maybe you're feeling a little achy, but you're okay. You still go to work. Again, those organisms are just starting to multiply. You're just starting to get some basic symptoms because your body's now just starting to realize it's under attack. The illness is also known as the invasion stage because this is when you have the highest number of organisms reproducing. It's when you're also showing the most severe signs and symptoms. It's when you're showing depending on what the disease is, you're having the highest fever. Maybe you've got the vomiting. Maybe you've got the diarrhea. Whatever it is, you're showing all the signs and symptoms because this is when the bacteria is actively growing, dividing, and your immune system isn't quite kicking in yet. It's just preparing itself to start to act. Then you go into the decline. At this point, your immune system is now trying to kill more viruses and bacteria than are reproducing, so the numbers are going down. So, your fever might not be as bad. Maybe you're not as congested. Maybe you're not vomiting quite as much. It doesn't mean you're fully better yet. You still have a lot of the organism in the body, but you're getting less and less because at this point your immune system is now winning. And then eventually you go into what's known as convalescence, where you are feeling fine. The signs and symptoms are gone. The only problem with convalescence is that doesn't mean there still are 0 bacteria or viruses in the body, which means you could still be transmitting even though you are feeling fine, because your immune system still has some cleaning up to do. It still has to get rid of the remainders, but at least there's enough gone that you're not feeling those signs and symptoms. Now, the time period, there is no numbers on here because depending on the organism could depend on what the timeline is. Depending on the healthy of the immune system can depend on what the timeline is. This timeline could be days. It could be, 0 to 3 days. It could be 0 to 7 days. It could be 0 to 2 weeks. Maybe this is 0 to 6 months. Maybe it's even longer than that. There are some organisms that work really fast and there are some organisms that work really slow. Now, there are some organisms that it doesn't matter how healthy your immune system is, they will cause disease. They're called true pathogens. So there are some organisms out there, and we'll get into specific ones, that you could be the healthiest person, the healthiest immune system, the strongest immune system. Doesn't matter, they will cause disease even in the healthiest individuals. They're just called true pathogens. Oh, here's my numbers. Now, we've talked about that the organism has to get in, but we haven't quite talked about the organism also has to get out. Eventually your immune system will kill and destroy things, but you yourself, being a carrier of the organism, can be secreting bacteria or viruses or other types of parasites. So you can be a carrier, and so anywhere pretty much any secretion that comes out of your body could be potentially infectious. It's one of the reasons we treat all bodily fluids as infections. It's universal blood precautions. We just assume everything is infectious, and that's because so many different bacteria or viruses can be in different portals of exit. So you can be losing bacteria through your skin. Your blood can be harboring different types of diseases. Your mouth, your saliva, your tears, secretions, urine, blood. I mean, anything. Pretty much if it comes out of your body, it's potentially infectious with something. Now, modes of transmission. How does some type of organism go from one person to another, or from an animal to a person? Or, what are different ways that we can go from a portal of exit to another person's portal of entry? That's transmission. How does it go from a reservoir or a portal of exit to another person's portal of entry? Well, there's 3 groups of transmission: contact, vehicle, and vector. Contact transmission means you're going to have some type of host-to-host, direct or indirect transmission. So it's going directly from host to host, so person to person, through some type of contact. So example, and these are when we're getting into communicable types of diseases, which means you can go from person to person. If I have the flu, I can spread the flu from person to person. Direct contact is direct bodily contact. You're touching someone else, you're kissing someone else. Any type of sexually transmitted disease, that's a direct contact. Indirect is you use an inanimate object. So if I cough on my hand, I touch a doorknob. It's also known as a fomite, an inanimate object. If I cough on my hand, touch a doorknob, and then someone else touches their doorknob and then touches their eyes or eats food, it's still person to person using that inanimate object. A droplet is generally short duration. This would be an example of a droplet, that when you sneeze or cough or even exhale, there are potentially different types of pathogens that can be in just those small, minute, microscopic water droplets coming from your body. But at short distances, water, even those little water droplets, microscopic, subject to gravity, and so they can only travel usually a few feet from the body. So if someone's got a cough or sneeze pretty close to you. Vehicle transmission is the spread of pathogens using something else. So air, water, or even food. So air is different than a droplet because we're talking it's not attached to a water droplet. It's just the virus or the bacteria is in the air. It can travel a farther distance before being subject to gravity. So if you've got an air conditioner running, it could be spraying different things that maybe came from the outside. Sweeping can sometimes kick things up into the dust, can then be in that air. Waterborne, again, if you're going to have some type of disease in water, again, closing down beaches, we can pick those up. Foodborne, this is usually if food is not properly cooked or processed, it's not refrigerated properly, that yes, food can transmit diseases from one source to another. And then vector transmission is usually some type of insect. Now, biological versus mechanical example. Biological is, for example, my mosquito here it sucks the blood of an animal and then it comes over and bites you. That's a biological transmission. That the actual microbe is inside that mosquito and it's inside the blood of that's being transmitted. Mechanical is, let's just say a fly lands on your hamburger bun at a picnic, maybe this weekend or last weekend. Where was that fly before it landed on your hamburger bun? When a fly lands on poop and then it comes over and lands on your food, there can definitely be some type of possible pathogen on its feet before it lands on you. That's a mechanical transmission. Ignore page numbers because that keeps changing as they update. But just some terms to classify infectious diseases, the difference between communicable and non-communicable. Communicable means it can be transmitted from one host to another. So the flu or a cold, you can easily transmit it, whether using an inanimate object or direct transmission. Non-communicable disease is you got a disease from outside of a host, or it came from an opportunistic pathogen, so a normal flora that went rogue. So the UTI, because a fecal bacteria got in your urinary tract. And I'm like, that doesn't mean now because you have a UTI, that's not transmissible. Cancer is considered a disease, but that's not transmissible. Tetanus, you got a cut and you got a bacteria in the body, that doesn't mean you're going to spread tetanus from person to person. So those are non-communicable diseases. And then finally in this PowerPoint, as we talked, again, lots of terminology, is what is epidemiology. So it's really looking at, we've kind of already talked about, well, what organisms cause what diseases, but let's start tracking, where are the diseases? When are they occurring? As along with how are they transmitted? It's really looking at where, when, and how. And so we're always wanting to know, are we getting new cases of a disease somewhere? Is one state having an outbreak? Where are these different diseases? If you have to travel, if you're going on a vacation, where are the diseases? Where are they found? What precautions might you have to take? That's epidemiology. And when we're looking at what are the number of cases, where are the number of cases, a couple terms, more terms, is incidence. That's the number of new cases of a disease in a certain area or population during a certain time. Say, okay, well, how many new flu cases have we seen this last winter? That's looking at number of new cases in a certain area in a certain time period. Are we having a higher number of cases than normal? Versus prevalent, well, what's the number of new cases in the area versus ones that are already existing? Now, generally, the flu kind of comes and goes as you get better, but if we look at different types of diseases that stick around, for example, HIV, incidence, maybe we want to know how many new cases of HIV were diagnosed, say, in 2023. Prevalence is looking at, well, how many new cases were diagnosed in 2023, with also, well, how many people in La Crosse County, not just were diagnosed in 2023, but how many people in La Crosse County have HIV? How many new cases and how many existing cases are there? What's the prevalence of a certain disease in a particular area? Not just number of new cases, but like everyone that might have that. Because we're constantly trying to track, are we having new cases? Is the incident number going up? Is our overall prevalence increasing? And so when we talk about, where are the diseases and looking at the numbers, an endemic disease means this is normally present in certain areas. We're not seeing an increase in number. We're not seeing a decrease in number. And I'd say, a common example, the flu. The flu seems to be, granted, we do have increase of cases in winter months, but country-wise, continent-wise, every country seems to have the flu. Every continent has the flu. That's, it's normally present. The numbers are about the same. We're not having a huge flu epidemic. It's endemic. It's just normally found, same numbers. Sporadic, sometimes that's looking at, well, all of a sudden, why does one country all of a sudden have an outbreak? We're all of a sudden seeing a lot of new cases of a disease. Maybe it's someone traveled. Maybe someone brought something. Maybe it's a brand new disease. We're not usually too worried about sporadics right away. Epidemic is all of a sudden you have a large number of increases of cases in a certain area. That's an epidemic. So maybe the state of Wisconsin has a huge epidemic in the flu one season, above and beyond the normal numbers. That's when we start to get worried, well, what's going on? Why are there so many new cases above the normal? And a pandemic is when we take an epidemic and then it travels. We're seeing not just a high number of cases in one area, one country, we're seeing a high number of cases worldwide. And COVID truly was one of those first pandemics that any of us have ever had to live through, and hope it's the only one we have to live through, where we saw a huge number of new cases worldwide. Now, as we're constantly talking about all these new cases, we are tracking them. It's like, well, where did we get them all? And as every one of you is going into the healthcare setting in some form, we want to know, are any of these diseases getting picked up in healthcare settings? And if they are, is it making the patient sicker? Is it making healthcare workers sicker? Is it spreading only in healthcare settings? And so we talk about diseases that are acquired by working with patients or working with healthcare workers in a healthcare setting, a nosocomial, or it's now getting renamed to a healthcare associated infection, meaning a patient comes in, we'll just say with HIV. A patient comes in with HIV, you, while working with them, were not using your standard precautions. You now got HIV from your patient because you as a healthcare worker acquired a disease from a patient while in a healthcare setting. That's considered a healthcare associated infection. Vice versa, if you went to work in your healthcare job and you had the flu and you didn't take any precautions, you didn't wear a mask, you didn't isolate, and your patient picked up the flu virus from you, that is a healthcare associated infection. That is an infection acquired by the patient while in that healthcare setting. So some types that are acquired are more reasons why the healthcare associated, I don't want to say types, reasons why healthcare associated infections occur. One, because of the healthcare environment. Like who's at the hospital? Well, sick people. So you've got lots of people with lots of different diseases in a very close area. The normal flora can become pathogenic. If you have normal flora on your skin and now you have an open wound because you had some type of surgery, well, those normal flora can maybe get into wounds where they're not supposed to be, and they cause those secondary infections. Just modern procedures. Catheters put you at a health risk. In any type of invasive diagnostic tool, even drawing blood in itself, you're still could be that parenteral route. Surgery, if you're opening up that first line of defense, these are all things that can potentially give you some type of disease. So we're constantly looking for ways, how do we control these healthcare associated infections? And again, it's universal blood body fluid precautions. We have to treat every single bodily fluid that comes from a patient as infectious and treat it as such. We just have to assume all those portals of exit are going to be infectious. And so it's what are ways to create barriers? But, the number one way truly is hand washing, because we don't want to get sick from our patients. We don't want patients to get sick from us. And we don't want patients or even us leaving hospital settings and making the general public unhealthy. So we're really doing all of these, proper precautions to really protect everyone. The people that are constantly monitoring all of this. So who's monitoring the number of new cases? Who's monitoring if we're having an epidemic or some type of outbreak? Well, we've got local agencies. We've got the city of La Crosse has our own health department. We've got state agencies. We've got our own state health department. National-wise, the United States uses the Center for Disease Control, so the CDC. That became a big highlight during COVID. The World Health Organization is who monitors really those full pandemics. They're in constant contact with all the different countries and where are we seeing cases and what are the numbers looking like. And then they do have computer systems for sharing all of the information. We do have a laboratory response network that we can track worldwide everything that's going on. And then the public health agencies, such as the CDC, such as the state health and the public health departments, their constant job is how can we stop diseases? What are ways we can limit or interrupt disease transmission? Monitoring food and water safety. They're the ones that are testing those waters and realize Lake Neshonoc was a little unhealthy. They're the ones that are constantly going to the different health departments and are checking out restaurants to make sure food is handled properly. They're working to reduce disease vectors. In the summer months, they're the ones that are constantly promoting, don't let standing water sit around. Let's decrease mosquitoes. They're enforcing and educating about immunization. They're treating individuals exposed to contagious pathogens and isolating them and quarantining them if needed. And that again became all very common when it came to COVID. And they're constantly educating the public on healthful choices. So what are, what are different ways we can stay healthy, and there used to be billboards in La Crosse that talked about, like cooking food and, making sure we don't have salmonella and the different types of foodborne infections, how do we cook food properly? How do we keep food? Make sure you're checking labels, making sure, you're not cross-contaminating. Those are all the different types of things that public health agencies are doing to try to keep us safe. So it's not just always in healthcare settings, but just in general. Because if you're sick outside of healthcare settings, where do you go? You go to the healthcare settings. And that could potentially, if it's a communicable disease, make others sick. So let me know if you have any questions on anything on this PowerPoint. Just send me an email.